So welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us this morning here on Zoom. As Glenn and I were just talking about, that has become the new platform for all things webinar and meeting. And so I really want to first thank my longtime friend Glenn Lyday for joining me and us today.
Yeah.
And to first just do a little bit of quick housekeeping. So we have this set up as a webinar. And so if you have questions, feel free to post them either in the chat or in Q&A, and I will sort of serve as moderator and interrupt Glenn as he goes along. And then also at the end, I'm happy to allow people to ask questions themselves. So just raise your hand on here if you want to do that. And so as I said, Glenn and I have been longtime friends. I had a great privilege of meeting him when I first moved to California almost 20 years ago, and we were a year apart at UCLA, and got to spend some time together there through some various organizations. And I think it's a little over 10 years ago, he joined a group called the Table Group, which is a group that was formed out of one of my favorite, if not my favorite, business author, Pat Lencioni, and a number of books that he wrote. And Glenn has been working with them and providing leadership coaching and a number of other strategic services to companies large and small before that, but under the Table Group banner for a long time. And recently he put out some content that just really resonated with me, which was that, during this time, there is just a leadership reflection that's required to either reorient or really reflect on your core values. And are they timeless? Are they things that need to adjust at a time like this? And so I wanted to invite Glenn on today to really talk through what they're thinking about at the Table Group, and no doubt talking to a lot of leaders around the world about how they're navigating in this environment. So I knew there would be a ton of really great takeaways and lessons and a great conversation here, and wanted to record it and allow others to participate in it as well. So Glenn, thank you so much for joining, and
Yeah.
great to have you.
Yeah, great to be here, Carrie. Thanks for having me, and great to see you. It has been, as you mentioned. I was thinking about it. It's been 18 years, and since we first met, and
Amazing.
I think this is relevant to this discussion about leadership, because I've always had a passion for leadership. One of the ways in which you and I first met is I was your orientation section leader back when you first got going at UCLA Anderson. I was beginning my second year. You were beginning your first, and so anyway, a long time has passed, but still talking about leadership, and so I appreciate you having me here. And I guess I'll just jump in and say too that you, Carrie, and everyone else that's participating. I'd love questions, comments, and Carrie, I said this to you before we started. I want to make this interactive and see kind of what your thoughts are on some of this as well as we go. So let me just jump in and say that I think part of, Carrie, what resonated with you was this idea that leadership right now matters probably more than ever, and that is seems to be sort of the cliche that we hear right now, and so I started to think about that in working with clients, and I think part of the reason that it matters so much right now is that people are desperately searching for answers and guidance. And so whether that's people in general that are looking to our federal, state, local officials for direction and guidance, or employees that are looking for direction and guidance. There's so many questions out there right now. how long are we going to stay home for? What's the benefit or what's the need to actually wear a mask on a daily basis? How do I best keep my family and myself safe when I go out? All of those different things that are running around in people's heads. Same thing for employees within organizations. So Carrie, as you mentioned, I've been doing this for actually a little over 10 years, working with Patrick Lencioni and the Table Group, helping leadership teams, helping CEOs and executives to create healthy organizations. And so in those interactions, particularly over the last several weeks, we've seen a number of themes that are bubbling up from some of those leaders that are taking this as a real opportunity to not just drive organizational health, but to drive the success of their organization. And so I think what you gravitated towards were the 7 C's. We put out an article about the 7 C's in order to help sort of make it through this crisis. And so I thought it'd be good to talk through those today. The first is around the first C, and probably the most important one is around clarity. Clarity. I mean, as Table Group consultants, we talk a lot about organizational clarity, and so that means highest level things from what's our mission or core purpose, what are our core values. Particularly right now, it's around what is most important right now. And we call that a thematic goal or a rally cry. But there's I'm sure, Carrie, you've heard this saying of never let a crisis go to waste. And this is what that's really around is a crisis brings a sense of focus and urgency for a team, for an organization, for a group of people like no other time can. And so I've seen this from our clients for sort of 3 different sort of buckets. And I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts in organizations that you're connected to. There's the bucket that sees this as their rally cry or crisis focus is survival. And very, very obviously there are industries, there are organizations that really it's all hands on deck in order to just keep the lights on over the next weeks and months. And then there's a second bucket that their rally cry, their thematic goal is around some sort of pivot. This is an opportunity to pivot, either we're required to pivot or we see an opportunity in the marketplace to actually make a change in how we sell or what we sell or what we do as an organization. I like the examples of the restaurants that are pushing takeout a lot more, or even selling groceries and doing other creative things. Selling my sister in San Antonio, lots of Mexican food in San Antonio, so there's lots of competition for Mexican food. One of her favorite spots, her family's favorite spots, they're now selling margaritas by the pitcher at their front door, and they've got a line on a daily basis of folks that are there to partake. So the pivot is another bucket, and many organizations are going through that. And then the third bucket is putting your foot on the gas. And those are the fortunate organizations that, because of this situation, see a real opportunity to just, put the foot down and say, this is our opportunity to deliver to our customers more effectively than ever, to grow our revenue more strongly than ever. And one of our businesses, one of our clients is a meal kit delivery company. Can you imagine what kind of an environment they're in right now, with everyone being forced to be at home, learning to cook, figuring out what to cook on a daily basis? So having meal kits delivered is something that they are, they cannot produce enough right now to sell. So
well, you look at Zoom, right? I mean, Zoom is just, as we were saying, I mean, they have Zoom during this, and even when they had some questions about some security flaws, they, I think, put some things out very rapidly in an environment like this. So I think it does give that. I mean, I was just earlier this morning having a conversation about how people react. And I feel like, we've been around long enough to be through several of these kinds of cycles. And, I tend to orient toward the entrepreneur and toward the earlier stage innovative companies.
Yeah.
And I feel like this has been, this extended business cycle that we've been in for the last 10 years. And now a lot of the bigger existing companies will tend, not all, but most will tend to go to that first bucket, which is about survival. And they have that survival instinct, and they cut everything. I mean, I saw this morning, Ford just killed a project with Rivian for a all electric SUV that they were going to.
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, not surprised. Like everything,
Not surprised.
Boeing just pulled off or pulled out of a merger they were going to do with Embraer. And so you just see this, anything that isn't core gets pushed aside. And so I laugh as the entrepreneur and go, okay, so the innovation teams are going to get cut. The corporate venture groups are going to get cut. The things that have a multi-year payback tend to get cut at a time like this.
Things.
And so if you're an entrepreneur, you go, hey, I got less competition now. And a lot of bigger companies in survival mode will start thinking about M&A as their way to get back into markets if they want to. And comparatively speaking, that will be the place to go. And so I think if you are looking to pivot or you are looking to step on the gas, you probably have an advantage now. But most bigger companies aren't going to reinvent at a time like this, and that's why they end up getting disrupted over time, right? No. And so it's fascinating that I feel like it's starting to already play out again.
Yeah.
And
you see it pretty quickly, and I think part of just thinking about some of those examples, I think part of the reason that this sea of clarity is so important is, imagine in one of those bigger companies, if you don't have the clarity of which bucket you're in, as an organization, who knows whether the survival bucket is the right one for you, or if it's the put the foot on the gas in certain areas. But if you're in that division that's getting cut and you're thinking, man, we had the opportunity to really do something great here, and yet other executives are saying, no, we got to hunker down and just conserve cash, that creates misalignment, right?
For sure.
And so really forcing the clarity of, okay, all of us need to be aligned on what is most important for us, and debate that and figure it out, which sort of leads to the second C that I want to talk about, which is around cohesion. And you carry. I know you said you're a fan of Pat's books. Probably his best-selling book is the 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, which has been a bestseller for almost 20 years now, and it articulates the right behaviors for any team to be cohesive, but what we think is super important is for a leadership team right now to be really cohesive, and that doesn't mean the touchy-feely, like we all love each other kind of thing, but good teams need to be able to argue with each other, to put everything out on the table, to really hold each other accountable, particularly right now. And we have to be intentional about that, right? It's not something that just necessarily happens naturally. Sometimes it does. Sometimes we just have a group that gets along really well and can engage in some of those more uncomfortable conversations with one another. But teams have to be intentional about it. And we found that over Zoom, that's even more difficult, right? And that that may seem obvious, but if you think about if you think about conflict and the importance of good productive conflict to get to alignment on an issue, like what's our top priority, over Zoom, you know what it looks like when particularly for someone like myself and probably many others, when I violently agree with something over Zoom, what do I look like? Not like that.
Yeah.
You know what it looks like when I violently disagree with something over Zoom? Yeah, about the same, like that, right? It's harder to see body language. It's harder to actually mine for conflict from people and hear what everyone has to say. And so part of as leaders, what you need to do is go out of your way to get that out on the table, to build a cohesive team, to make sure that folks are saying what they need to say so that you can have alignment. Going back to your, some of the examples that you brought up around some of the big companies and priorities. If we don't say that kind of stuff, like, hey, I really think that we should actually, invest in this now, rather than cut it. If we don't have the opportunity to say that, then there's no way that we're going to really have alignment going forward. So, I don't know what you're seeing. I know you've said it. We've talked about the 5 dysfunctions in the past, but are you seeing this with organizations that you're connected with? Do you see how, I don't know, do you see the challenges over Zoom as well?
I do. I mean, I think the couple that I feel like is it's a little bit of that out of sight, out of mind, in that we particularly here, I mean, I'm here in my office all by myself, and we had a really good momentum and energy building where we had a number of folks in here on a really regular cadence. And so even if we didn't have anything particularly set to talk about, we were having that regular interaction. And so that is, and especially in the early stages of the company, that cadence of interaction is really key to have. And it's hard to make up for that via Slack and Zoom and email and text and other channels. So you have to be really intentional, whether it's scheduling regular check-ins or other things to do that, to just do a pulse check and a check-in. And I think we've done okay. I can't say I feel like we've done great there, because to your point, it's hard. And then even in the teams that I'm a part of, that I feel like we do have really good cohesion, just even the communication is harder, where I start to talk and somebody else starts to talk and I'm trying to be great. Oh, go ahead. And then all of a sudden it's draining from energy. And I don't know that enough has been talked about or studied. I was saying, just physiologically, I think I'm seeing it with my kids, how tired they are after a day of school. And so it has to be having an effect on all of us in just adjusting. And if this became the norm for the foreseeable future, I'm sure we will, but there is a learning process, just like anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. And everyone's learning how to do things differently. And part of what, and I saw that it sounds like there's some other folks on the call that are familiar with the 5 dysfunctions. And so, that at the base of that framework is trust and vulnerability based trust. And it's, in some ways, it's really hard over Zoom to build a level of trust and openness and vulnerability with one another, to be able to be transparent on and argue with one another and hold each other accountable, all those other things. But on the other hand, right now, we are all vulnerable, and so that sort of leads to the next C, which is connection. As leaders and on teams, we need to show that we're human, and so most of us are at home. Carrie, I see you're in your office there by yourself, socially distant.
Very distant.
but most of us are at home. Everyone knows that you're at home. So if your dog barks or your baby cries or you're distracted by something, be honest about it, and folks will generally understand that. And so I think part of the opportunity here is to just be comfortable being you and being vulnerable. And as leaders of teams, encouraging some of that with your team. Not, maybe you could go too far. You don't necessarily have to wear a collared shirt on Zoom, but probably good to at least wear a shirt. But be comfortable, be you, and also be comfortable having those conversations with your teammates. Like right now, folks are struggling with as I said at the beginning, all kinds of questions that they need answers to, and to just be able to talk openly about what, how are your kids doing? Like, how, are you all hanging in there? Is your whole family safe and feeling okay about this? You feel good about, about the organization and where we're heading. Those kinds of conversations that just don't normally come up in a regular team meeting, where we tend to just dive straight in. I think now more than ever, taking at least a few minutes to just do that personal connection, that personal check-in with one another, super important.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic point. And I think is often, I think as a leader, you feel like hey, I can't show weakness. I can't show that this is affecting me in any way, because
Right.
that's gonna weaken my position, where it actually, that like that realness. And yeah, we all have. I mean, I who knows? I don't know anybody who can tell me exactly what life is going to look like here in Southern California 6 months from now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think we can see some pictures and some windows into it, but I feel like everybody in the country, and in the world for that matter, is somewhat in this grand experiment of
Yeah.
how are we going to, as best we can, coexist with this.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that as leaders, like if you're the CEO of a company, there's a balance of, and we'll talk about a couple of other C's of courage and confidence. There's a balance of having having confidence in saying like, hey, we'll figure this out,
Mm-hmm.
but also being able to say, I don't have all the answers. Like I need your help. We need to continue to see how this goes, and to be vulnerable with your folks. That's super important.
Mm-hmm.
Let me talk about a couple of the other C's here, and then I'd love to hear some questions and talk about this more a little bit more of a dialogue. So the fourth C is communicate.
Mm-hmm.
We would say over communicate, but that doesn't start with C. The seven C's. But communicate is such a critical step right now. And I'd say there's probably no such thing as too much communication, particularly right now. And so what does that look like for organizations and teams? I've got a couple of clients that were doing all hands on a quarterly basis. Startups with 100 people, they were doing all hands on a quarterly basis. Now they're doing them weekly.
Mm-hmm.
Big shift, right? And of course that's important right now, because folks are not as connected to one another, connected to the organization. So let's bring everybody together and just reiterate, hey, we're still focused on this. We're still trying to launch this product or tackle this customer issue or deal with this. And folks need to hear that on a regular basis, and just be communicated to, even if it's some of the same messages over and over again. So all hands, upping the all hands, upping the one-on-ones with your team. Sometimes that's as simple as email updates, but don't just
Mm-hmm.
rely on email to communicate. Team meetings, we talked a little bit about how important team meetings are, and I think for most organizations that we're working with right now, they're doing with their teams, whether it's an executive team or a team anywhere within the organization. Many of those teams, I'd say the majority are doing a daily check-in, if not a every other day check-in with one another, collectively as a team, just to stay connected and make sure that they're communicating well what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, are you seeing that or hearing that from folks, just upping the level of communication?
I think the effective organizations and people are.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely there's a group I'm involved with here of a lot of the bigger company CEOs here in Orange County, and a lot of them have been very intentional about increasing communication within their organizations and even within the community. And I think that's been a positive in general, to show some of that community support and leadership. And I think what we've tried to do, at least here at our organization, we were really starting to get, as I was saying, a lot of momentum. We were doing a lot of events, and we did initially an evaluation, said, okay, do we pull back or do we actually double down? And I think we actually have increased probably threefold the number of events and just done it virtually.
Yeah.
And that's allowed us to your point earlier, allowed us to pull in some really awesome people into our community that we were focused in a more physical geography, and said, hey, let's
Right.
open this up, and let's even think about how we can amplify this, because there are people beyond just our borders here in Southern California that need help. And so I think we've seen a lot of resonance, and it's allowed me to have folks like you join us as well. So I think it's been great.
Yeah. We, in this virtual world, there are opportunities, and while it's in some ways harder to communicate, as I said, that you don't worry about being redundant with your folks, with your employees, with your team, probably even with customers out there.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay to be redundant, and we say, particularly with your employees, during normal times, and particularly right now, you're probably doing a good job of over communication if your employees can do and maybe are doing a Saturday Night Live impression of you repeating the same.
Yeah. I think that's a
like,
great.
oh, there Carrie goes again, saying about talking about the
That's right.
priority of this, and our main focus is this, and our strategy is this, and yeah, we heard that, we get it, but folks need to hear that, and need to know that that's still important.
That's a great barometer. I mean, one of my sayings is, about the time I'm sick of talking about something is probably when people have just started listening.
Yeah.
And so I think that idea of they could do an impression, that means maybe it's starting to set in. So that's a good one. I like that.
Yeah. So I'll quickly touch on the last three C's, with two of which I already hinted at: courage and confidence, and those go together. Your employees, your team needs to know that we're going to make it through this, that we're going to survive, that we're going to accomplish our goals even amidst a tough time. And so I think another supporting point for why teamwork is so important, because it is so much easier, we found, for leaders to have that courage and confidence if they've got 7 other folks on their team to lean on, to give that courage and confidence to their employees as well, to say, hey, me and my team really believe that this is the strategy, that we're gonna make it through this plan, that we're gonna tackle this and be really effective at it, and that we're all gonna be okay. Being a leader, being a CEO they talk about it, it's a lonely job, but needing and relying on a team of folks to be able to give that courage and confidence is super important. And then the last C that we've talked about in a few different ways here is get creative. To do kind of what you just described, Carrie, with your organization of, hey, now we have an opportunity to not just be local, to expand our reach and do things differently than we ever thought. You see this in how restaurants are delivering, and in the spirits companies that are now producing hand sanitizer. We're finding lots of creative ways to survive, to make it through, maybe even to thrive in this business. And I think some of the tendency, and I know this for myself, at least initially, when you're thrown up just a major threat, a huge amount of uncertainty, creativity can get stifled. And probably for most organizations, those first few weeks, there wasn't a whole lot of creativity necessarily going on, other than the survival type. But I think that now we have an opportunity to really emphasize how important it is for us to do things differently, and really think outside of the box of how we've normally done business, and reward creativity as well. So encouraging that kind of creativity with your team, with your organization, I think is a valuable way to kind of help us through this. So, and I love your example with your organization.
Yeah, I think that is absolutely. I think the point, honestly, is that I resonate with is that fear and uncertainty and creativity are really, can fight each other, and yet the whole notion of creativity is this idea of exploring the unknown and being comfortable with that. And so I've been thinking a lot about how do we, and particularly here in this area, which has historically been a pretty conservative business environment. How do we unlock this creativity and this latent entrepreneurial energy that I think has been suppressed for a long time, and celebrate it? I mean, I think whether it's just pointing and saying, hey, look at what exciting things they're doing, or you give people a vision that they could be creative as well, and they could
Right.
go do it, because I think a lot of the jobs that people have comfortably been in for this last cycle may disappear as people focus in and get clear on their core, and a lot of extraneous
Yeah,
things get cut in the near term. So
totally.
it seems
Yeah.
like creativity is our way out, I
It,
guess is the way I think about it.
yeah. I was going to say something very, very similar on that. I think, most organizations will survive this, right? Yes, sadly, there are companies that are really struggling, and companies that will not. But most of you will
Mhm.
survive this, and the fact of the matter is, you will emerge from this either stronger or weaker as a result of this. And I think to go on the offensive
Mhm.
and say, hey, we're going to emerge from this stronger, requires creativity, and really requires a lot of those other things that we've been talking through. But it's going to require you to think differently and come up with some new ways of emerging from this. So I think from clients that we worked with, the ones that are really kind of have that hat on of thinking optimistically about what they're going to do different when we right now, and when we make it out of this,
Mhm.
are the ones that are ultimately going to be the most successful.
That's right. Yeah, that's always the challenge, is like, what's the right time horizon that I should be, is it, hey, what's the gate to get through and survive? And I think that's often the only one that I see too many people focused on,
Yeah,
versus what is going to be on the other side. I think that the reality of where I have planted myself and my investments with what I do here forces a longer term time horizon, and
yeah,
we're focused on emerging ideas, and ideally innovative companies of the future, and also a sense of culture change, and trying to be that place where the creatives feel like they have a home
yeah,
to
yeah,
bring disruptive ideas and not get hit with, no, that can't work, but more this, how might we actually make this real?
yeah. Yeah, I love that. I love that you're fostering that, and I do think that for organizations, you talk about, what's the right time horizon to be thinking
Hmm.
about. Um, Obviously, it's all of them. Probably for most organizations, but using your team of experts, which is a leadership team in an organization, or your closest colleagues, to pressure test that, like, hey, should we be spending, should we really be spending 99% of our time on the next month, or should
Hmm.
we maybe ratchet that back a little bit to, yes, it's still really important for us to survive, but if we do the right things, we'll survive, and we should probably start thinking about 6 months ahead, or
That's right.
a year ahead, or 3 years ahead, and what we need to do in order to be successful then. And because inevitably, if it's only you, you're going to get it wrong.
That's right.
So utilizing some of your closest colleagues, or really a leadership team to battle test that, I think is super.
Yeah. So I want to, Glenn, we have a good question here. So one of our panelists, Ian, asked, he's leading a team of product managers for a SaaS company, and they're selling into places like government and higher education. And he's saying that he has a clarity goal of foot on the gas. So they're saying we're in that bucket,
Yeah,
and that's the organizational goal. And he's saying with this need, he's trying to figure out how to balance that with the need to be considerate of people's personal stressors and distractions in this kind of environment.
yeah, yeah. Well, I think it's a really valid thing to be concerned about, with all that's going on for everyone, sort of individually and personally. Um, Work and our personal lives have never been so
That's right.
commingled, and so being empathetic to your team members through that, I think is really important. But really, honestly, I think if I were part of a team or an organization that was in that rally cry bucket of put our foot on the gas, they're going to be super excited about that,
They should be.
and should be, yeah, they should be super excited about it. So don't be apologetic to giving them that sort of communication and excitement and just clarity to say, hey, this is a great opportunity for us to do something amazing. But I also know that you have family members and you've got kids at home, and that you're likely stressed about this situation. So let's talk about it and work through that together. But hopefully likely your best people anyway are going to be the ones that are going to really lean into that opportunity and take advantage of it.
Yeah, to your point, the integration has never been higher. I mean, I feel like every day right now is a work day, and I've actually just gotten very comfortable. My kids don't have events and things that they normally would on weekends that greatly distract me. So I've ended up working far more, and just embraced it and said, hey, this is a season. And I think that, as a leader, my advice would be, to your point, like, you really get people excited about the opportunity.
Yeah.
And this is the chance for this organization to pull ahead where others aren't figuring this out and don't see the opportunity. And most people want to be part of something like that. And if they don't, they may not be the right people.
Right.
And I mean, you're at a time right now where there are going to be a lot of great people. And I think some organizations are looking at that as another opportunity and saying, hey, we can top grade. We can find the people that are going to be excited about that.
For sure.
And so I think it is also a reality, and not trying to be insensitive, because I think there's been this great equalization of everybody has to deal with these challenges. But just have, I think, your point, really good, honest dialogue about it.
Totally. Yeah. I'd say, balance the excitement and alignment around that goal with the empathy and understanding as a manager, as a leader that you should have for each of your people and what they're going through. So yes, the need to rally a team behind something and get them, ensure that everyone's aligned to that is super important. But we're all going through this in it's sort of different stages of change and transition and confusion. I was talking about my roller coaster with some friends the other day. I'm like, I feel like my mood is dependent on how I'm forecasting the future. And if, some days when it feels like, hey, we're going to have a vaccine soon enough, and there's treatment out there, we're going to all be back at work, and things are going to be normal in a couple months, I'm in a great mood. And then the next day when I feel like, that vaccine actually is not going to turn out as well as I hoped, and we may not be back at work for 6 months, and like, of course, like, we're all going to go through those stages. So just recognize that and be empathetic to that with the folks that you're leading.
Mm-hmm. So how are you thinking about, part of what's been fascinating too is to see people in leadership positions in our society sort of seizing the microphone, seizing the spotlight, either because they've been thrust into it or they've seized it. How as an organization that really studies this closely and thinks a lot about it, how are you looking? I'm not trying to pick winners, losers, et cetera, but how are you thinking about leadership principles where, some people, I would say, maybe aren't even exhibiting real leadership. They just happen to be in those positions where they can fill a void. And I mean, one of the best memes I've seen is this comedian who is trying to give people direction and just showing, like, well, you should do this, but only when it's not this. And it's just circular, because I think, to your point from the outset, there's just been so much noise that, I mean, to say, how do we really as people, should we be evaluating? I mean, I think these C's could be a good way for us to help evaluate where the real leaders are.
And another, I think another frame is, you mentioned Pat Lencioni's TED Talk, and it was on one of the frameworks that we work with organizations on. It's the book is called The Ideal Team Player, but I think it very much absolutely has to apply to a leader first. And the three filters are humble, hungry, and smart.
Yeah, I loved that.
so think about the the leaders that you're referring to, all at all levels of leadership right now. And by humble, hungry, smart. So humble, making it about others and not themselves, kind of simply stated. Hungry, just the desire to do more, to drive to be better. And smart, what we mean by smart is emotional intelligence, to be able to read a room or understand people so that you can engage and not constantly step on toes, basically. So probably humility is the one that is really tested the most through this. And you can see that the leaders who are really thinking about helping people and helping hospitals, helping the general public out there, helping their teams, helping their organizations, and the ones that just want more want more airtime or want the spotlight. And so I think looking at that in your leaders, looking for that in your teammates, I think is a good set of filters to apply. And sometimes, sadly, some of those leaders just don't even pass that first filter of humble.
Yeah, I think that's great insights. So other questions from the group? Anybody have questions they want to ask live or put in chat? And happy to keep Glenn on for a few more minutes, or else I will ask the questions. So what is the temperature that you're getting from your clients right now in those buckets, from survival versus, I would say, in most, it's probably survival versus step on the gas.
Yeah.
Is probably where most of them are falling at one of those. I mean, what are you sensing from, because I would guess organizations that you work with are going to tend to be a more enlightened group, I would think, just by the nature of their working with you guys.
Yeah. Well, and I think we didn't really talk about this at the beginning, but we've got about 40 consultants around the world that do this, and all with somewhat different areas of focus, kind of based on geography and industry and so I'm based in San Francisco, and obviously in the Bay Area. Spent a lot of time with startups and technology companies of sort of all shapes and sizes. But I think there are those organizations that in the survival bucket that really did just have to, at least for the first few weeks, kind of went dark. Not just with me, but I think just in general, we're like hunkered down, like we got to figure out which end is up, and likely do some some layoffs. I had a client that within the first week, I think maybe 2 weeks, they did some layoffs. They cut pay for really kind of across the board for their entire organization. And really the organization was, there were a lot of folks within the organization that had encouraged this. Like, I would rather do that than lose a big chunk of our employees. So I will take a 10% pay cut to make it through this for now. But those organizations were really hunkered down and focused on, like, let's make it through these first 2 weeks and kind of figure out what's what. I think now they're starting to pull up and recognize that some of these, some of the things that we talked about are important in order to make it through, and so we're figuring out kind of what that looks like for them. Now, some of them, may recognize that it's hard to invest the time, energy, and budget in the same way that we did before. But then that bucket that's in the sort of foot on the gas thematic goal or rally cry, they are seeing the opportunity and really investing in health. And that doesn't mean necessarily just engaging with us, but that they're really making sure that their teams are staying aligned, that they are communicating super often with each other, that they're really staying connected with one another to accomplish something pretty dramatic. So. These last 6 weeks, I'm sure for you and probably for just about everybody, have been, have been a roller coaster, not just a roller coaster of emotions, but a roller coaster of kind of activity, of sort of making it through that first scare to like, okay, this is the new normal. Let's figure it out.
It's amazing how far away 6 weeks ago feels now. I mean, I was, I was in Mexico 6 weeks ago. I think about some of the meetings that I had in January and February and go, was that a year or two ago? It's amazing how
I remember shaking people's hands and being in a room with strangers. It was a crazy time back then.
That's right. Yeah, it's wild. Well, and you probably remember this. I mean, we had several conversations back in 2009 when I took over a company.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking about this in anticipation of our chat, because one of the things that I had to do when I came in there, and this was sort of post financial crisis, just in the beginnings of the aftermath of that, and I had to do a full evaluation of what business are we in, why do we exist? I mean, some sort of existential type of evaluation.
Sure.
And I'll be interested, even as you were thinking about those buckets of like getting clear. It's pretty hard when you've been in it, in many cases, to go to that level of kind of raw. And I'll be curious to see if you get pulled in to some of those organizations to have that level of conversation, to really say, like, why do we exist? Why are we here? What is the real definition? I grew up in retail, and I think retail has been forever changed in many respects because of this. I mean, there are already a lot of trends that were disrupting and influencing it, but it'll be interesting to see what we see on the other side of those people who are really having those core evaluative conversations to go, why do we even have this organization, and should it even exist?
Should it even still be
here? In any of the same form.
Yeah. And I think, no matter where an organization is on this, in those buckets that I talked about, or just how much of a crisis you feel like you're in, I think that to your point, just really challenging yourselves to have those conversations, and think about kind of why you're here, and really, getting the team aligned around that is the right thing. And maybe that does mean a dramatic shift in what the business is doing, or your sort of core purpose at the end of the day. But better to define that now, than let that create even more confusion as you continue on.
That's right. Yeah. Well, Glenn, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts you have for the group?
Well, I'll say, first, thank you, Carrie, for having me join. I really enjoyed catching up with you, and obviously I'm passionate about this work and helping leaders. So the thing I'll say to anyone that's listening is just hang in there. We're all going through this mess, all in different ways. But I think continuing to focus on some of the fundamentals of organizational health, of keeping your team right, and keeping your organization clear, will inevitably help you. And while I know that's harder to do right now because of the crisis that we're in and the fact that we're all remote, taking the time and energy to really make that happen will pay off for you, kind of no matter where you are in this cycle.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. It was great to see you. And let's catch up again soon.
All right. Thanks, Gary.
All right. Be well. Thanks.
Right.
Take care.